We're going to call this meeting of the Civilian Review Board to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone have any edits or additions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept them as written.
So moved, Madam Chair.
May I have a second? Second. All in favor, please raise your hands. Minutes carry. Thank you. Just by way of update, we are missing a couple of board members this evening, so we will not have, we have a quorum, but we will not have our full board. By way of updates also, I have reached out to the mayor's office, to our liaison contact there, and just know that the process is ongoing for finding replacements for our board members who will be leaving us and not renewing their terms. As soon as I hear updates from them, I will let the rest of you know. Also, we did get a response back from CPD, and I believe we're planning on Chief Bryant or a representative joining us for the June meeting. Okay? All right, with that, I will turn it over. Yes?
Curious, other than board member McIntosh, is there any other board members leaving?
Yes.
Oh, you
were not here. So,
No, I wasn't.
Reverend Tatum and Board McIntosh are both not seeking a second term. So they will be leaving us when we have their replacements sworn in, which
Before.
Oh, we hope that we will have the replacements before they leave. If we don't, we are at risk of not having quorum at our meetings because Board Member Fluharty did retire and resigned early. Technically, the April meeting is supposed to be the last meeting of everyone who is termed, and so the goal is to have those new folks identified so that by May they can be sworn in. However, go ahead, Mr. Tobias.
I'll need to double check the bylaws regarding quorum, because usually it's the majority of the seats that are full, not the full 11. So I'll double check that for you.
Yep, thank you. So yes, we are losing 3.
So please apply for the Civilian Review Board. Applications are open.
Yes. Mark, Mac, Reverend Tatum.
Oh, Mac also?
Yep.
I didn't hear that. Oh.
Yeah. There you go.
So not to be too sad. Hopefully we'll see you one more time. But now I will turn it over to the Inspector General for any updates.
Oh, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We actually, sitting in front of you should be a copy of the annual report. And we're going to give you just a brief overview of the annual report, and that's going to be done by Nate Ryan.
Good afternoon, Chair Burns, members of the board. I'm excited to be here to present the data for our 2023 annual report. The data starts on page 7. So we're going to start with the source of citizen complaints. The Department of the Inspector General received many contacts from citizens amounting to 1,946 last year. We received a majority of those contacts through the main line at almost 85%. This was, the 1946 was actually a 51% increase in average daily contacts over 22. The vast majority of these complaints, of course, were the hotline, followed by email and website. Looking at chart B, breakdown of those complaints, so 1,946. To start, we opened 290 into investigations, and we closed 1,644 at intake. The top 3 reasons for closure were insufficient information, followed by preliminary investigation found no police misconduct, and no jurisdiction. Those 3 categories accounted for 2/3 of all closures. And of note, just for the top category, which is insufficient information to proceed, we make multiple attempts to each complainant, but sometimes we unfortunately don't receive contact information, or there just isn't enough information to open an investigation. For chart D, citizen complaints opened into investigations. That was the 290, which equated to 24 per month. Next, we move on to the monthly breakdown. As one might expect, we received the top number of complaints received during the warmer months of June, July, August, and September. Those 4 months accounted for 40% of our complaints received, with an average of 162 per month. That did not actually translate into investigations opened. We had the greatest number of investigations opened in March with 37, and then investigations completed in August with 36. Both the investigations opened and completed averaged about 24 per month. Next, we have the allegations breakdown. The top 2 reasons, just to start, a allegation may include multiple, one allegation, a complaint may include multiple allegations. Allegations are assigned per officer, and the DIG may include additional allegations if misconduct or excessive use of force was discovered during the course of investigation. Actions taken, which is an officer did or did not do something in particular, such as file a police report, didn't talk to a witness, and so on, that accounted to 41% of all the allegations. And then rude and discourteous for 14%. Of the investigation disposition per allegation, so 881 allegations. The top 2 categories were unfounded with 507 and exonerated with 261. Of note, 80 of those allegations were sustained. For chart H, the DIG completed 881 allegation investigations. Of course, that goes to you, the CPRB. You reviewed 866 and disagreed with only 2. So you had a 99.8% agreement with the Department of the Inspector General. Those investigations that you review, they go to the chain of command. They reviewed and returned 483 of those allegations to us. They disagreed with 50 of those. Those 50 disagreements are primarily unfounded or exonerated and vice versa. And that accounted for 34 of that 50, which is 68%. If we remove just those 2 categories, that would be a 97% agreement with the chain of command and the Department of the Inspector General. Those unfounded and exonerated differences, from what I saw, was a minor difference in definition, especially during the beginning of the year. For I, just want to remind the board, we started reviewing cases for the Inspector General in January of 23. So all 2002 cases were reviewed in 23, and you reviewed 286 cases. The chain of command has returned 130 of those. For J, here is the outcome of those cases returned by the chain of command. The majority, 455, received no further action, which is expected given that the majority of allegations were either unfounded or exonerated, 20 positive corrective actions, and 8 documented constructive counselings. And that is the data for our 23 annual report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Now, going back to G, going back to your investigation disposition per allegation, where it says there were 80 that were sustained, does that mean that those were the ones that you guys put charges or levied some kind of an allegation against a police, or sustained an allegation against a police officer, and it went to the upper command? Now, how many of those 80 did we get any word back from? 28 of them. Yeah. So that means that we still got what? 52 or 52 that we're still waiting to hear about? Or
There is still, so we can look at, to give you specifics, so yes, to the answer to your question, we would still be looking for feedback, because right now, the chain of command has only reviewed 130 of those reports that we've submitted to them. So we're still waiting for feedback. The one thing that I can tell you is when it comes to our recommendation for sustain, again, sometimes there are some actions that's taken. I think we looked at whether or
Like
not.
the counseling and stuff like that?
Right, and then there are situations that when we've reviewed the fact that they've agreed with us, they have agreed with the fact that we've recommended that the allegation be sustained. Sometimes based on the time frame also, there was no action taken simply because of the time frame. They agreed that the officer actions violated policy and procedure, but there may not have been any action taken simply because of, due to the timeliness.
When you say time frame, you mean there's a time limit on when they can do something in reference to discipline or sending them to seek counseling? There's a time frame for those recommendations?
So I will probably let Tiara respond to there, because there is, the one thing I know when we read it, they said, yeah, we agree, but it might have been with, some reports, keep in mind that we did findings in 2020, we closed the investigation in 2022.
So there's
However, it might not have
Is there some
reviewed.
form of a statute of limitation as to how long you can bring something before them or something like that in reference to a police officer?
So the contract says that
Oh,
there
here we
is
go.
no,
I knew that was coming. The contract says.
always says that. It's always the contract says, and I'm sorry for bending over here. The contract
Do me a
says there
favor,
is
my brother,
no,
if you would, pull her up a chair.
Here, I'll actually trade.
thank you. There's no timeline for your review,
Okay.
and there's no timeline for chain of command review. What the contract says, though, is that an arbitrator may consider whether or not the entire process takes over 180 days when determining discipline, or if discipline can be issued. However, there is no timeline, and so that is likely a difference in opinion between chain of command and the IG's office that we are still working out.
Okay.
But as far as I know, there's only been maybe one or two. Maybe one or two where they've said, hey, we agree, but because it went beyond this 180 days, we don't think discipline can be issued. That is still an outstanding question that we are trying to flesh out with chain of command. But according to the plain text of the contract, it just says it can be considered. It doesn't say discipline will be barred if in fact the entire process takes longer than 180 days. And you can see that in Article 8 if you want to refer back to that language, just so that you are clear. Okay?
Just to piggyback off Reverend Tatum's questions, so we have 52 outstanding sustained complaints, right?
We haven't
and
heard
so
back from.
the 52 that are outstanding, Inspector General, what's your understanding of where those 52 are right now? Are they still being processed, all 52? Is that what's going on? So these just take time to work through the chain of command or is there something else other than this just takes time to work through the chain of command?
It just takes time. I mean, because if you see in the stats, we can say that, we know that the board has reviewed 286 reports. And we know thus far, up until we stopped our totals, that the chain of command has at least reviewed 130 of those reports. So we would still, just doing the math, we probably still have 156 reports that have been submitted to the chain of command that we're still waiting for them to send that back, to go through the process, review whether they agree and whatever actions are taken. So as that information comes, we're putting all of that in the spreadsheet.
Any other questions for the Inspector General?
Certainly. Thank you. This is super helpful. One quick question, was wondering whether or not we had additional 2022 data as well. I know some of this includes 2022 cases that we reviewed in 2023, but I was wondering if we also had, to date 2022 data that the chain of command has also reviewed.
So keeping in mind, and if I am answering your question, all reports that we closed in 2022, the board didn't start reviewing reports until 2023. So this data of reports that was reviewed includes all cases that were closed. So this does include complaints that were received in 2022 that were open to investigations, that were reviewed and sent through the process. So again, the reason that we kept the data for 2023 is because this is everything that occurred in 2023, again, which would be proving the reports and it going through the chain of command.
Okay, so every case to date that we've reviewed, CPD is also, that this is included in here as well.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
And so again, you know, as we start getting, I would like to kind of do more updates to the board, but as we start getting the information back, now that we kind of have a outline of the information we'll be providing to the board, you'll start seeing those totals get updated and updated, so we can provide that information to you.
Excellent.
I have one more question. Still staying with this data, because I'm so glad to see this portion, because it gives us something tangible to look at. But I guess my question is, just like we were talking about the 50-some that were still, you know, waiting to be heard from, is there a section in here that can tell us, that can be put in here to tell us, you know, that we still have 52 or 8 or whatever it is of these cases that are still pending for word from upper command or something like that, so we kind of have an idea of what's going on? If anybody understands what I'm saying.
So what we can do is, if you're saying we can work the totals out for you, so what we can do is put a section in there to tell you what cases we're still looking at.
Yes,
Because all I
ma'am.
did, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
we can definitely.
Inspector General, do you get any report back that tells you the specific kinds of disciplines or corrective actions that are taken? Do you get feedback beyond, we're taking action?
Yes, if you, on chart J, it tells us specifically, and that's on page 11, what was taken. So with some of the recommendations for sustained misconduct, some of the action that was taken was positive corrective action, and then some of it was documented constructive counseling. That's what's noted as to what type of action was taken.
I see that, but I'm just saying the specifics of, you know, what that means.
So I believe, and I'll.
No, in reference to what type of an allegation?
What type of allegation?
In reference to, like, say, for instance, if it was sustained, how many of these came out of that allegation? Like, say, for instance, if it was cussing, let's just use that, if it was cussing.
Okay, so the type of allegation, I think right now what we have it broken down to is to be able to say that we know that based on the chart, we have sustained misconduct in 80 different types of allegations.
Okay.
So that can be from cussing, that can be from, I won't say cussing. That can be from using profanity, that could be from body cam, you know, not having your body cam on. It could be from the fact that they were supposed to maybe do a report that didn't. So that's sustained. So we're looking at least 80 allegations of which we have sustained misconduct. And out of those 80, it tells you the type of corrective action that was taken. And that corrective action, again, could be for not having your body cam on, profanity. It could be for whatever other allegations that we've kind of looked at. And I believe, okay, I was just thinking of something else.
Yep. I still didn't get my question answered.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, that's fine.
Can you ask him
Yeah,
to
well,
answer?
that's fine. I was just wondering, when I see positive corrective action or documented constructive counseling, those are really broad, overarching categories. I don't know what that means. Does that mean, yeah, I'm not even going to speculate.
I can look at that. Positive corrective action, from what we are able to see just reading it, is usually verbal. Constructive counseling could be more versus verbal. It could be more of a constructive sitting down and counseling with a person. As far as them losing any particular time or anything like that, that we haven't seen. But if you want me to get more of a defined definition of positive corrective action, and I can definitely look into that. But I think for the most part, that's what it is. It's more verbal, and counseling would be sitting down and counseling with the person.
And so, if I may.
Oh, please.
So, you're absolutely right. So verbal, and then the. Oral. Or oral. And then the DCC is written, and I think it may stay in your file for X amount of months, depending on what it is.
So, again, thank you. This is helpful to have this information, especially I like the monthly breakdown, and will be helpful for CPD to review as well, and members of the public. Kind of building off this point about the breakdown, maybe just a few data requests that I would have would be a breakdown of the sustained allegations, just in terms of specifically sustained allegations, what the breakdown was in terms of the types of allegations for cases that were found extant, so excessive force, misconduct. So if possible, and I know this is, diving into the data some more, and I know it's going to take some time, but, when we talk about actions taken and not taken, it'd be helpful to get a sense of, excessive force or not, that type of breakdown. And then, in addition, would be specific on this, if we can get the breakdown of the forms of positive corrective action that was taken. And I know obviously there are certain specifics that limit how much detail we can get, but as much detail would be helpful. And then the last piece, just in terms of this percentage, so when it comes to the percentage agreement with the Department of Inspector General findings from the board and you all, that 99%, that makes sense based on the way in which a lot of this process has worked. Your investigators are doing the case. They're on the ground doing that work. We're reviewing it, really thinking about broader strokes as it relates to policy. But one of the questions I had was this breakdown between CPD chain of command agreeing with 90% of the findings. I'm having trouble understanding that particular calculation to see whether or not, I'd be interested in whether or not there are other, maybe this is something we can review as a board, like what the average is, with IGs around the country or boards around the country in terms of what the board agrees with, and then where the agreement between the board and CPD or their police departments are, just so that we can get a sense of kind of what that standard looks at. And then one last question is, so we have documented corrective action here and then constructive counseling. Do we know whether or not there are other steps related to policy that CPD is reviewing? And you may not have, of course, these answers now, but I would love to get that other piece in there as well.
So you said a lot of things,
Yes.
honestly, and I'll be the first to say we'll kind of go back and review some of the things that you're requesting. But some of the things, again, we're getting ready to get into the warmer months. I have very limited staff, so trying to, break down all of these 881 allegations into specific things of unfounded and things like that.
I think you just want the sustained.
Yeah, I'm just focused on what has been sustained and what the breakdown of the sustained
Okay.
allegations are.
Okay, so you just want to look at the type of allegations that we had. Okay, and what the outcome was as far as, okay, so thank you for that.
Yes, and only focus on the sustained ones.
Okay.
And I was just going to interject really briefly. The piece about the policy recommendations is actually one of the questions that we sent to Chief Bryant and asked her to bring back in June. So I'll ask that instead of asking the IG to speculate on it, that we'll find
great.
out in June.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to chime in, for comparisons with other review boards, inspector generals, it may be a little tough because of different structures. Ours is a little unique, so it's kind of, it could be comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, so part of that, maybe the request is, so as we make this available publicly, whether it's NACOL or other organizations that might be open to reviewing the publicly available data and just kind of seeing where our review board measures up, that would be helpful. So obviously, that may not be a request you all have to make, but that's something that I think as a board, I'd be interested in getting a sense of, just so that we have a little bit of a standard and a baseline as well, even if it's a little different in terms of our structure.
Yeah, we definitely can look into that, but to your point and commenting on what Nate said, a lot of the different boards are different, structures are different, based on the charter, what they actually look at, whether they're looking at city agencies, whether they're looking at county agencies. So a lot of times the makeup is very different. So maybe this could be something that we could kind of talk offline so we can find out specifically what it is you're looking at, because it sounds to me like if we're talking about the reports that we're looking at, so I just need to know a little bit more specific what you're talking about, and then I'll be able to reach out, because we've met some different people at NACO, and we know that there's some different boards out there, so we can kind of look and see exactly what it is you're trying to, whatever comparison it is you're trying to get.
Yeah,
might
I'm
also-
mostly looking at the sustained, just the sustained findings that the Department Inspector General makes, and then where CPD disagrees, and kind of that percentage, kind of getting a sense of whether that's normal or not, so that we can, because my understanding is now, there's a number of cases where they've disagreed with the sustained finding, and there's really not much we can do about that from there, other than just say they disagreed with that sustained finding.
Well, all the investigations are all based on policy and procedure. So if we're looking at whether or not the investigations that we submitted to CPD, whether they agreed or not, what we would be looking at is if we say that the officer violated a policy, and again, they're saying, hey, they agreed, or if they're saying they disagree, it's really looking at the report to say, what specifically are you saying they disagreed on? Just like we did a breakdown of the unfounded exonerated. One of the things I know early on when we met with CPD that we did realize, and so we were able to kind of change that, is the allegations we were receiving are allegations of excessive use of force. And so when we were doing the investigation, we found that the officers' actions were within policy and procedure. So what we did is say, we exonerated them, because we said, okay, they took action, but what they did was within policy and procedure. However, the issue is what we were doing was exonerating the allegation of use of force. So you can't exonerate a use of force, because if an officer did do use of force, that's a violation. So then we went back to rewording it to be a little bit more consistent with what CPD was doing. So we do unfounded now if it's an allegation of use of force. If it's an allegation of force, where the person is saying, well, force was used, then we will look at that, and if force was used and it was within policy and procedure, in those instances, we would exonerate, saying that force was used, but it was within policy or procedure. But we just changed the terminology instead of doing exonerated.
No, that is super helpful, because now understanding the context as to the fact that we're still going to continue to receive a number of complaints related to excessive use of force that will be found within policy. That's just what it is. It's going to be. So it's going to be exonerated or unfounded in a particular situation. And so, in addition, for our board to consider when we're thinking about the policy itself, that there isn't going to necessarily be just the disagreements between the IG and the chain of command. In many instances, those complaints are still going to be found exonerated but there might be something with the policy that should be reviewed. So that's something that I want to consider as a board as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just to be clear, what we're saying is exonerated is the excessive piece, right? It's the excessive. We're saying, or that's why we cannot say that it's okay, that's exonerated, because excessive is not okay. It's against policy, right? But we're saying, yes, use of force was used, but that use of force was within policy. You know,
Yeah,
does
I
that
mean,
make sense?
no, that's super helpful,
It's the
but
excessive.
as we've,
The word excessive is where.
and that's, okay, so that's a piece,
Yeah.
but as we've indicated and seen, there are situations and circumstances where use of force is in policy, but it's, whether it's, tasers, certain situations where it's within policy, but maybe that policy itself should be reviewed, but.
Yes, sir.
Two things quickly, and then if we can get to cases. So one, I would encourage board members, if you have the opportunity, to take advantage of some of the webinar invitations that come to us. I know Board Member Younger is going to be attending one this month, but some of those opportunities are spaces in which we can find out more about the differences between our structure versus someone in Texas or a board in, I don't know, Alabama, like wherever boards are. And so I think that can help give some context to, as Nate was saying, apples to oranges. Our structure, it looks unique when compared to surrounding states, and we might actually see, how other folks do it, be able to ask questions. So I think that's number one. I think number two, maybe for future reports, just as it's being put together, because I don't want to ask you to go backwards and redo pieces from here, but disaggregating some of those sustained findings. So even if we see a pattern, is it that every time there's a disagreement with a sustained, it's on a use of force, or it's on a, plug in your category? Because I think that would be useful just to know what are the proportions of cases that we're getting disagreements on, because that may help inform kind of our thinking moving forward, or what our broader recommendations might be. But I also wanted to say that just the sheer number of investigations is, it's astounding. So kudos to you and your team for all the legwork, especially given the startup, the fact that this office didn't exist, and then it existed, and then immediately with an opening, you all started receiving hundreds and hundreds of reports. So I do not want to undersell how great an accomplishment it's been for the office to run, and for how many reports have been processed through. So thank you all. And to board members who, for many of us, it was our first opportunity to look through these, so I appreciate it. And if we could, if there are no other questions about the information contained in, I'd like to be able to get us caught up on the cases that we did not get through last week.
I do have one more question.
Yes.
So we agree with 99.8% of the Department Inspector General findings here. I mean, that's like pretty much every case we get and review, we agree with. So one, just want to get a sense of in terms of the ways in which we're doing our review committees and how we're moving along that process in terms of where we're focused on a board, especially because of this level of, agreement. Like we're on board with what's going on. Let's move it to CPD. I just want to ask us to consider thinking about how we're structuring our review committees, and then to focus on, as a committee or as separate review committees, to focus then on those cases, whether you all have to review them or not, but actually us as a board, looking back on the cases in which we've seen a disagreement between CPD and the Department of Inspector General in sustained cases, and determining as a board where, where those patterns exist. So I wouldn't necessarily just put it on the Department of Inspector General to be looking at all those numbers. I would hope that we can think about how we structure, maybe it's those, the 4 o'clock timeline during our review meetings, but how we want to structure then reviewing the outcomes of these completed cases. Dedicating more time to doing that.
as long as we can get to the cases first, then I think we'll have more time to get to dedicating to those issues. So I'm going to turn it over to Board Member Nathan. His committee was not able to meet before the last month's meeting, and so we have their full load of cases from last month to go over today.
Thank you. So we have case number 2023-1220. This case arose from a noise complaint because of loud music playing in a vehicle in front of an apartment complex. And the complainant alleged 4 things. Number 1, the complainant alleged that the officer punched her son in the face, which she alleged was excessive. A body-worn camera reveals that the complainant's son took off his shirt and squared up with his fist balled, ready to strike the officer. The investigation found that the officer did strike her son, but it was supported by CPD policies, procedures, and was not excessive, so that allegation was closed with a finding of unfounded. We agree. Second allegation was that the complainant further alleged after punching her son, the officer chased him into the apartment building, slammed his hand into the door. The investigation found no evidence that that occurred, and so it was closed with a finding of unfounded, and we agreed with that finding. Third, the complainant alleged that she was detained for no reason. The body-worn camera revealed that the complainant put her foot in the open door of the police car and refused to withdraw it after repeated requests to do so. The investigation found the officer did detain the complainant, but he did so with reason, and so this allegation was closed as unfounded. And finally, the complainant alleged that the respondent officers were rude and harassing her. There was no evidence to substantiate the claim against the officer, therefore it was recommended that the allegation be closed as unfounded. So I move to accept the DIG's findings of unfounded regarding allegation 1, 2, 3, and 4 in case number 1220.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions?
This is case number 1399. The complainant alleges that he was unlawfully stopped by 2 CPD officers for running a stop sign on his motorcycle. Complainant admitted that he did run the stop sign, but did so to get out of the way of an officer who turned his emergency lights on. BWC footage revealed that the complainant appeared to be speeding and ran 2 stop signs before stopping because, in his words, he was test driving his motorcycle. Citations were within CPD policy. DIG recommended a finding of exonerated regarding the charge of officer misconduct. We agreed, and so I move in case number 2023-1399 to accept the DIG's finding of exonerated regarding the allegation of that he was stopped unlawfully.
Okay, that's in case number 23-1399. Any questions? Okay.
This case 2023-1413, this ended up all over social media. It arose as a result of a complaint of, in which, I'm sorry, a complaint was made that an 11-year-old was sending nude photos in texting with an adult male. The allegation was that the officer who came to investigate it conducted a preliminary investigation of a juvenile and let's see. failed to, where's the allegation here? I apologize. Conducted it improperly, this investigation. There appears to be, as I read through this report, a terrible misunderstanding in the communication between the officer and the young girl's dad. The entire encounter took 28 seconds. The officer understood that the father wanted to have the officer speak to the daughter. The daughter was asleep. The dad did not want the officer to do that. And so it appears that there was a misunderstanding, and the case was closed as unfounded. There was no evidence that would sustain the allegation of police misconduct. It was just an unfortunate misunderstanding, but it did go out over social media and elicited a really strong community response, because apparently there was the suggestion that the officer was going to criminalize the child's behavior, and that created quite a firestorm. But in reading through the complaint, it appears that it was an unfortunate situation of complete misunderstanding of what the parent wanted.
So, this question is, what did the officer say, or did they indicate what they said? Because that was
Yeah.
a part on social media that I heard.
Yeah, let's see here. The officer, what this says is that the officer was trying to express the seriousness of the situation, and that the dad ended contact before the officer was able to recover and establish dialogue with the father.
Do we have specific quotes from the officer?
I don't see specific quotes. Does the IG have?
I think they were on the Ring camera.
We're on a Ring camera. And so, yeah, but I don't have the specific quotes. The officer stated she thought that she was communicating or was being asked a question about worst-case scenario, about the consequences of this, and that the parent was asking for an officer to do a scared straight approach tactic with his daughter. And as she asked questions about that, he was offended and thought that the officer was suggesting that his daughter might be arrested. I think that was how this came down. Do you have specific quotes?
With this case, we were looking at what the allegation is. The allegation that came about was that the officer did not properly conduct a preliminary investigation of a juvenile reported to be a victim of an online incident. That's what the allegation is. That's what we looked at. Based on the investigation that was done, body camera was reviewed along with the Ring camera. And so the investigator that did that along and also reviewed that did not feel that based on what they saw, there was did not show the officer being rude. The officer was asking questions. We understand that this is something that hits social media, but when we do an investigation, we look at, again, what the allegation is. We look at all of the circumstances involving the allegation, which would have been when the officers responded, what actions did they take, their actions, did it was it complying with policy and procedure? It was looking at the body cam. Did they feel that the officer's conduct or demeanor was rude or in any way? And it was not. And that's what our findings was on this case.
I guess where I'm confused is the actual statement made. So there's the allegation, which is about whether or not this was reviewed in the process, and that's determined that everything followed procedure there. But there was a statement that was made that elicited a response and some complaints, and I just don't have. And so is the statement by the investigator reviewing this saying that that statement did not violate policy?
Well, if I could, I remember watching, I saw the video from the Ring camera, and I wish I could say that the officer's statement wasn't true, but it was, in the sense that in a perfect world, a parent could call and say, hey, this adult has been harassing my child or has been begging my child for nude photos. My kid is a kid with a kid brain, and she sent them. And I want you to do something about the adult, which I think is what the dad initially was calling about, like wanting some intervention. And then I think the officer's comments were along the lines of she could be charged with, and then said whatever it was, which is unfortunately true. Like, kids get charged with sexting all the time, even though the laws are written in a way that is supposed to protect them from the predatory behavior of adults. And so knowing that, the officer's statements, while from a personal offense standpoint, like I get why the community was upset given that dad wanted to get help because this grown-up was manipulating his child. The officer's statement about her being eligible to be charged is not unfounded. I have cases where they've decided to charge children with those things. And so I can understand that that's, I'm assuming, while no misconduct was found, because her statement wasn't lawfully incorrect.
And I believe part of when, in that footage, the officer did not know that, and that's, the report talks about that. When the officer responded, they did not know the age, because that was not given to them. They didn't know that until they were having the conversation with the father on the porch regarding the age. That all came out during that whole Ring conversation.
I think Board Member Younger had a,
I think I saw the same video that you did, and then after the officer asked that question, then he immediately said, I want you to leave, I think, something like that.
The dad, yeah.
The dad did, because, but I thought that the officers knew the age of the child.
They did not, at least
They did
according to
not.
this, and they came in with very different assumptions about what was being asked of them.
I can see, it didn't hit me well when I saw that. I have to admit that, you know, that you wouldn't say your child can be charged if you knew the age, and, I mean, that shouldn't be the first thing that would come off the officer's tongue at that point. But I can see where no policy was violated at this juncture. I get it.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I get it. I think the comments were inappropriate. I don't know. I mean, whether or not it violates policy, that's the determination that, you know, this IG is going to make and the board's going to make and CPD is going to make. But in terms of the actual comments themselves, seem to be inappropriate comments. Again, I don't know the exact context, which is why I was trying to get some more detail about the quotes themselves. But the indication that the officer did not know initially that the child was 11 years old, well, when the officer made the statements, then the father responded with, she's 11 years old. And then the officer went on and said, well, she can still be charged. And so just more statements were made in that case. And so to me, that's kind of where I'm trying to get a sense as to, I mean, any indication of whether or not those comments are appropriate or not, or whether or not that was even reviewed. I don't seem to get much more information other than it was a misunderstanding.
Yeah, here's from the IG's report. The father requested a female officer, and the officer stated she didn't know how young the daughter was and thought that the father wanted a female officer to act in a big sister role in speaking to her. The officer stated her thought of speaking to the daughter in terms of worst-case scenario about the consequences that could result from it being involved in inappropriate online activity. Her understanding was that the father was requesting for officers to do a scared straight approach tactic with his daughter. She restated she didn't know the age of the daughter, and she stated her assumption was that she was a teenager with access to the internet and the daughter was unaware of the potential consequences that could happen to her.
I'm assuming that is from the interview.
That's from the interview.
That's from the interview after the fact. And the father was, or the complainant, whether it's father or not, somebody else, was the complainant also interviewed?
The,
Or were there other, yeah.
let's see. The complainant was interviewed, as well as there was body-worn camera, yeah. I don't see if the Ring camera, was that also part of the documents used? The father was interviewed, but I don't see the Ring camera, if that was part of the evidence. Do you know if it was?
I'm looking right now.
Oh, I'm
just to
sorry.
see. Yeah, I'm just looking to see if that was downloaded.
Dispatch article is pretty straightforward.
It's in several of the emails in there.
Well, but also remember,
Now to put the actual video
even with what the officer said, she's still right. Like 11 years old.
Oh, okay.
But from the point of inappropriateness, lawfully,
So they did.
that was not an untrue statement.
Okay.
And so, go ahead, did you find it?
Yeah, so it appears that the information from the video was put in a lot of the different files here, and they were looking, and they did interview the father to get additional information.
Yeah, we have that's listed. I didn't see the,
You're right, I know I
Ring
was
camera.
looking, that's what I was looking in the report. It should have been listed up under the documents, but they had the body cam footage there, and they were able to review that.
I mean, to me, I think, I look at the comments that were reported in the dispatch article and on social media, but specifically the dispatch article, those specific quotes, I don't think were in the investigation memo itself. And so when the context of reviewing the memo, it basically seems like there was a misunderstanding. When you see the footage and the specific comments made, those seem to be inappropriate comments. I mean, inappropriate comments that may not rise to the level of a policy violation, but
I think we're going to disagree on inappropriate, just because factually, what the officer said is true. There are 11-year-olds who are charged. Some of those cases have gone to the Supreme Court in this state, charged with these offenses. And so that is not factually inaccurate. It may feel like, this is why I said personally, we may feel that it was abhorrent behavior from the sense of, would we, with our knowledge, have made that kind of statement to a kid who had been taken advantage of by an adult? Likely, most of us would not. But that does not mean that the officer saying it, saying what is legally actually possible, I don't want to see that kid get charged with sexting. But does the code allow for it? It absolutely does.
well,
And so my point being is that part of our considerations are not necessarily, in this case, we can't make a utopia out of what we would like to see with policy when it comes to these types of cases. But if at the end of the review, that officer in making those statements had not actually violated policy, then that's a different question as to, do we want to have a policy about whether officers can say or threaten arrest for young children? That's very different.
And it's important, just for a point of clarification, Chair Burns, it is important to, we're assuming that part of the premise is that the officer knew the child's age. And so yes, even if, you're saying even if the officer knew the child's age, what the officer said was true. In this case, the officer claims to not have known the child's age and believe that the child was a teenager. That may change even the sort of context or the appearance of a lack of wisdom. What we're really challenging now is not policy, but wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just I was gonna make one last point here. I actually think this is misconduct. I think pretty straightforward incidents of misconduct. I think then you add an additional element. So we're saying it's true, it's fine. I mean, the police chief, Bryant herself, put out a statement after this saying, you know, partial quote here, my expectation is that our officers treat every victim of crime with compassion, decency, and dignity. She said, quote, what I saw in that video did not reflect that, end quote. Another quote, continuing on this, I want to make clear, this incident does not reflect the division as a whole. She continued, quote, our officers do outstanding work to bring comfort and justice to victims every day. As soon as we learned of the incident, we immediately reached out to the father and apologized and assured him that this matter was being fully investigated. Both the actions of this officer and, more importantly, any crime committed against this child. So that's end quote there. So I think, I mean, what you saw in the video, there's a full investigation through this process. To me, it was misconduct. The statements were misconduct, so.
But
yeah.
let me just say, the chief did say to the father that that statement or those statements in the case would be under investigation. So her saying what she said during that interview, maybe she changed after she read the investigation, because remember, the officer, A, said she didn't know the age, right? And B, I think she stated something about the scared straight
Right.
deal, which that would have been a scared straight comment.
But she was making comments to the father. She wasn't making comments to the child. And so, to me, the investigation here, I mean, the quotes are pretty straightforward. Not all of that is included in the actual memo itself.
I understand that. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do, because in order to make a misconduct recommendation, I think you have to find what it is in misconduct of. And so if you'd like to look into that, I think that's great. I'd also ask you to read the reports ahead of the meetings too, because I think you asked to get them, and now everyone gets them, so everyone has access. And I think that way, any additional questions could have been submitted to the IG ahead of this meeting to get the clarification, but also trusting the subcommittee that had this case to hear what it is that they came up with, even interrogating and answering and asking those same questions amongst their group. And if there is no violation, then consider what policy recommendation you'd like to make, which we can save for our policy discussion at the end of the meeting, because this is the part that happens, right? We have again, we personally may be offended by what the officer said. And we may all think as a policy matter that those statements and phrases shouldn't be used with an 11-year-old child. At the same time, that would have to be a new policy we're making. That is not.
I don't think it's a new policy.
Well, I disagree with you, because we see kids prosecuted this age for this exact thing.
It's not that. It's the
Across-
comments. It's
Yeah.
the comments made. It's
Yeah, but her
inappropriate
comments
miss.
weren't untrue. That's the thing.
It doesn't have to do with
Then,
comments
then
being
Mr.
untrue.
Strickland, I will ask you to figure out what sort of policy recommendation you'd like to make, and I would like to ask Board Member Nathan to be able to finish his recitation, because he didn't even get to finish it, so that we can hear what his subcommittee thought about this case and what recommendation they'd like to have presented to the board.
Okay, it would be rude, discourteous behavior.
So in this case, we agreed with the findings of the Inspector General that the allegation against the officer be closed with a finding of unfounded. And so, let's see. I'm sorry. Let me just make sure that it's, excuse me. Yes. In case number 2023-1413, I move to accept the IG's finding of unfounded with respect to this allegation of misconduct.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, any other questions?
Does anybody else on this board find those comments potentially rising to the level of a policy violation, misconduct, rude or discourteous behavior?
I don't,
No.
Board Member Strickland, I think like probably most people, and Chairwoman addressed this, the optics on this were not good. And I would bet other people probably got calls about it when they saw the video. But it does not sound like there was a policy that was violated, and from what Chairwoman said, that the statements are lawfully accurate. Were they the best comments to make? I would absolutely disagree that they were.
I think there are cases in which officers are sustained for use of profanity that doesn't even rise to the level of the misconduct that.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Isn't there a motion on the floor?
Yep, and a
Point of
second.
order.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Board Member Nathan, you can continue.
Case number 2023-1442. This complaint arose from a series of at least 5 incidents involving a police officer and members of the Mobile Crisis Response Team between July and September of 2023. And so one of the members of the Mobile Crisis Response Team alleged, number one, that the officer was involved in a wellness check and escalated the situation instead of de-escalating the situation. Body-worn camera shows that the officer used professional conduct despite being criticized for his African accent, and the IG found no evidence that substantiated that allegation and recommended the allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. We agree. Second, that the officer was driving so fast through the intersection with the mobile crisis team member that the members left their seat in the police cruiser. Based on the information obtained, the investigation found the officer was driving 55 miles an hour in a 35-mile zone, and so it was recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed with a finding of sustained with regard to speeding. Third, that the officer was in a meeting with the Mobile Crisis Response Team and was disrespectful and demeaning to them by stating he didn't need them to do his job, and that he felt that they don't need to do things as a team because they don't know what they're doing. According to the officer, he was not disrespectful. Unfortunately, there was no body-worn camera evidence regarding this because that's not required in a meeting between the officer and the Mobile Crisis Response Team. And so And in addition, several of the MCR team refused to cooperate in the investigation. So there simply wasn't enough evidence to see whether the officer was or was not disrespectful to the MCR team. It was recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed with a finding of unfounded. We agreed. The fourth had to do with an allegation that the officer made a U-turn not related to a run. Based on the evidence obtained, it appears that the officer did make a U-turn that was not related to a run, and so that allegation was sustained. And finally, that the officer was running red lights with no lights on and no sirens. Based on the information from GPS, the investigation found no allegation that sustained this, no evidence that sustained this, substantiated this allegation, and so it was closed with a finding of unfounded. Oh, there was a sixth one, and that had to do with the officer parking his cruiser at an FOP lodge. The evidence appears that he was never at the lodge but was in the area, and so that was closed with a finding of unfounded. So there are 6 allegations. I move to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded with respect to allegation 1, sustain with respect to allegation 2, that was the speeding allegation, unfounded with respect to number 3, that the officer was disrespectful, sustain with respect to allegation 4, that he did do this U-turn, unfounded with respect to allegation 5, that he was driving with no lights on and with no siren, and finally, unfounded with respect to allegation 6, that he went to the lodge and illegally parked in case number 23-1442.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions?
I'm just trying to get a sense if we have any indication as to why the mobile crisis response unit wasn't willing
Cooperative.
to.
Yeah, there was one MCR team member that filed this, but I would ask the IG, after reaching out, they did not want to cooperate. Do we know why they didn't want to cooperate?
No, I believe, they filed this complaint with their HR. That's how we got it. Our investigator did reach out to interview the different members who filed the complaint. I believe only one wanted to be interviewed, the other ones didn't. They said the information that they put in their complaint was all that they wanted to provide to us. And so based on the interview that we were able to get with the one person and the documents for the file, that was how this investigation was completed. We can always reach out to someone if they don't want to be interviewed. I mean, we don't force someone to be interviewed.
Yeah, certainly. I just think it's a delicate situation with the mobile crisis response unit, which is set up with these specifically trained CPD officers and Columbus public health clinicians. And so I just want to get some more insight in terms of this particular program and whether or not this has been a problem or this is a larger problem. Obviously not for you all to continue to look into that, but this is something that is of concern, as this is like a pretty important program here. So getting a complaint from that unit is concerning.
Well, what I will tell you is, we take any complaint, whether it's from this unit, whether it's from a citizen, from anybody. We take all complaints serious, and we reach out to everyone. We feel that if you file a complaint and we reach out to get additional information, it is prudent for you to be able to provide that information. That unit or that citizen is the one that made the complaint in the first place. If they don't feel that they want to give us any more information, there's nothing else we can do. But again, we take any complaint serious, And just not just because it's that unit, but from any citizen. So again, just reiterating, if they filed a complaint and we're trying to get additional information, they don't want to provide it, there's nothing we can actually do at that point.
Yeah. Just want to make a note for us to follow up on whether or not these units are continuing to occur, whether or not this has been a larger issue. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Pastor Nathan.
We got a second on that one, right?
Yep.
Okay. This is case number 1478. The complainant was sitting in a car not belonging to her. She told the owner she was sitting in the car because she was hot. When the officers arrived, she said that a friend told her that there was a key in the car. She would not disclose the friend's name. The officers believed that she was acting strangely. They asked if she had consumed any alcohol or was on any medications. She said she had gotten a shot. They asked her if she had any relatives who could get her, since they didn't think it was wise for her to leave because she was wandering around the neighborhood. Her father could not communicate in English well and could not come for her, so they transported her to a hospital for an evaluation. The complainant made 4 allegations as a result of this. First of all, she said that 2 female officers and a male officer arrested her and disclosed her medical history to family members without her consent. The investigation found no evidence that that occurred, and so it was recommended that that allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Second, she said that the same male officer with 5 other officers used force to detain her. There was no evidence that that allegation also occurred, and it was recommended the allegation be closed as unfounded. Third, she said that while she was bathing, the male officer watched her. The investigation found no evidence that that allegation occurred, and it was recommended the allegation be closed as unfounded. And finally, that the male officer was spreading gossip about her medical condition. Again, there was no evidence regarding that allegation. It was recommended that the allegation be closed as unfounded, and so I move to accept the IG's finding of unfounded with respect to all 4 allegations.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
Case number 2023-1514. This case involves an allegation of racial profiling due to a traffic stop. The officers ran plates of a car and discovered that the driver was driving under a suspended license. When the driver was pulled over, the police discovered that he was not the driver with the suspended license, and it appears they entered the wrong plate number, so they let him go. The car that was pulled over was the same make, model, color as the car they entered. And in this case, there was no evidence that the officers racially profiled during the traffic stop, but it was simply a matter of putting in the wrong data into the computer. And so the IG found that there was no evidence that the complainant was racially profiled. We agree. And so I move in case number 2023-1514 to accept the IG's finding of unfounded.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions?
This is case number 2023-1532. The complaint arose after officers responded to an assault complaint. While investigating, the officer discovered the complainant's car parked next to a fire hydrant. In the course of impounding the complainant's car for illegal parking, the officers opened the car door to make sure there was nothing valuable in the car. After speaking with the complainant's sister, the officer changed course of action and issued a traffic citation. So he's going to impound and then ended up issuing a citation instead. The complainant alleges that the officer searched her vehicle without a warrant. In this case, the officer did conduct an inventory of the vehicle because he was initially going to impound the vehicle. The officer's actions were within CPD policy, and so the IG recommended that that allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. And second, she said she couldn't be issued a parking citation from the officer. And allegation 2, based on the information obtained, the officer was within policy to issue a complaint for a parking citation because she was parked in front of a fire hydrant. And so the IG recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed with a finding of exonerated. I move to accept the IG's finding of unfounded with respect to an illegal search of the vehicle without a warrant, and unfounded, exonerated with respect to the issuance of the citation in case number 2023-1532.
Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Younger. Any questions?
Okay, this is case number 2023, this is the last one, 2023-1577. The case arose as a result of the officers removing a child from their father in a custody dispute. The motion presented, the mother presented the officers with a motion to vacate the father's custody. The officers failed to distinguish between a court order and a court motion. They failed to have the appropriate knowledge and also failed to follow correct procedure before removing the child. And so there are two allegations. There's one allegation, that is that the officers illegally took, complainant alleged the officers illegally took his son from his residence with incorrect court filings, and the IG sustained that allegation. There were two failures. One, they failed to have the appropriate knowledge of distinguishing between a court motion and a court order, and they failed to follow correct procedure before removing the child. And so there were two failures that the IG found. We agree, and I move to accept the IG's finding of sustained regarding this officer in case number 2023-1577.
May I have a second? Second. Any questions?
I was just curious, I wish Dr. Jones was here, but I did wonder about the training that officers have in reviewing court documents. And, are officers specifically trained to distinguish between motions and court orders? Do they know how to review court documents? It just struck me as something that I wondered if that's something that is taught in the academy or that officers somehow acquired because they're not attorneys. So I just wondered whether officers had that body of knowledge.
Maybe some knowledge, but if all else fails, they certainly have resources, or the sergeant.
And that was the second part of the finding, but I just wondered about the first part of the finding regarding that they should have had that body of knowledge to be able to distinguish between a motion and a court order. And so that was part of the finding.
That we had was, in doing this case, was the fact that there is, between the two officers, when they looked at the paperwork, one of the officers did say, should we follow up? And so they did know when they were reviewing this, that if they were not sure, that they had a resource in which to follow up, and they chose not to do that. They chose
I-
to.
I-
I understand your question, what
Yeah.
you're saying, but no. So that was the thing, you know.
So then, would the IG want to modify the recommendation that that is rather to restrict it to their failure to follow up and discover whether the paperwork was right, rather than they failed to have the correct knowledge?
Well, if I could interject, generally, motions, especially here in Franklin County, it's electronic filing, and there are on multiple portions of a filed document what it is.
Yes.
Like it says motion, it's usually stamped motion, whereas orders specifically have the judicial signature.
I understand that. I just wondered, do officers know what a motion is?
And so I can't say yay or nay to that, because some may and some may not. There's so much that's covered in the academy, I can't even tell you whether that's covered or to what extent. But well, go ahead.
It is likely that they're not taught the difference between a motion and an order. However, if there are policies and procedures that require a court order to be reviewed and or confirmed, as in like a domestic violence court order or warrant or things of that nature, then they would have that training on how to identify what that looks like, confirm with the court or the clerk prior to taking any action. But generally speaking, likely not. We do like a testifying in court training where we would go over certain court documents, things like that. But beyond that, no.
So, we don't have to belabor this, but I did wonder if it would be better to restrict this to their failure to follow up.
Can I read what our conclusion was? And maybe, because I thought the conclusion was clear and maybe it wasn't. But the conclusion that we have in here, it says that the officers failed to have the knowledge to know the difference between a court order, between a court motion and a court order. Additionally, based on the CPD legal update regarding interference with custody, the officers did not follow the appropriate procedures for this type of incident. It should be noted the incident was dispatched outgoing. So it's not just one thing we're saying. It's a combination. So
Yeah.
we weren't just
And
saying
so-
failure for knowledge.
No,
Okay.
I completely understand that you added that other statement. I'm just wondering if the first statement is an accurate statement. That is, that the basis of this decision of sustained ought to be entirely on the second ground and not at all on the first ground. That's what, I'm just asking a point of clarification.
Well, I think it's your interpretation, because I think that what we're trying to explain is they didn't have the knowledge, and because they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't follow the procedures in which to obtain that knowledge. So maybe if you're saying you don't like the wording, I mean, that's understandable, but I think what we're trying to say is they didn't have the knowledge, and based on the fact that they didn't have the knowledge, there's procedures in place for them to follow, for them to obtain that knowledge before they take any type of action. And we're saying they didn't do that.
I remember a while ago, we had a case, something similar, where it was a custody disagreement between a man and a woman. And the officers made a phone call to find out what was the proper determination. And once they did that, they knew what they needed to do
Right.
in reference to whatever the document was and whatnot.
Right.
All right, we have, I'm going to go through these one at a time instead of as a group, but here are the cases from Subcommittee 1. We can do it at the end, because that can be, because it's going to be part of the policy discussion, it'll be part of what's at the, back half. Starting with case number 2023-1220, we've got motioned and seconded to accept as written. All in favor, please raise your hands. Are there any opposed?
I have a question. Did we do case number 1514?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the racial profiling due to a traffic stop.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure, 'cause I hadn't have it checked off on my list.
Yep. That was the suspended license mistake.
Okay, very good.
Chair Burns, I don't believe Board Member Strickland voted on that last vote. I just want to make sure all the votes are counted.
Okay, so we'll take it again. Let's raise your hands high if you're voting yes to accept the recommendations of 23-1220. Please raise your hands. All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next is case number 23-1399. This is the stop sign and motorcycle. All in favor, please raise your hands.
He did say he was test driving the motorcycle.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, next up, case number 23-1413. That was the case with the social media coverage. All in favor of accepting as the subcommittee's recommended, raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Case number 23-1442. This was the mobile crisis response team. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Which vote,
Motion.
I just didn't know which way he was voting. Abstention?
On 1442.
Is this the mobile?
1442 is the mobile
Yeah.
crisis. Okay, next, case number 23-1478. This was the young woman sitting in a car that was not hers. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-1514. This was the racial profiling traffic stop case. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-1532. This was response to an assault complaint. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And last but not least, case number 23-1577. This was the custody dispute. It's been moved and seconded to accept. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, we will go ahead and take our 10-minute break. When we come back, we have 3 remaining cases that we did not get to last week, and then the cases for this month. Let's all be back at 3:38. 49, which was a holdover from last time. Are you doing this report after?
Oh, okay, I can do it. Yeah. This is 1549.
Yes.
Case 1549, City of Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging misconduct and excessive use of force by a CPD officer. The complainant alleged an officer approached his vehicle, instructed him to turn it off and step out of the vehicle. However, the officer never told him why he was being detained or arrested. The complainant also alleged he asked why he was being asked to step out of his vehicle. However, the officer removed him and a struggle occurred. After review of CPD policies and procedures and the documentation received by IAB and an interview with the officer, the investigation revealed the statement by the officer was consistent with the BWC footage and the use of force report. The investigation revealed, due to information received by the officer, he had probable cause to detain or arrest the complainant. The complainant being in a running vehicle, the officer initially approached and asked if the complainant to step out the car and explained once he did, they would discuss the reasoning for the stop. The officer's actions did not violate any CPD directive. Got to get some edits here. Therefore, it is recommended allegation 1 of misconduct be closed with a finding of exonerated. In regards to allegation 2, it was determined the force exercised and the encounter with the complainant by the officer was within policy and not excessive, as the complainant was not compliant with the officer's commands and physically resisted the officer and attacked the officer. Therefore, it is recommended allegation 2 of excessive use of force closed with a finding of unfounded. In this particular case, our review committee had a few questions to the Department of Inspector General that was submitted, which is why we held this particular case. And then I don't know if you want to talk a little bit or ask maybe specifically kind of what questions you had and then where those clarifications those points came up, and I'll give you a second to pull that up. So again, this case was something that was actually Internal Affairs had an initial use of force report here, and so the Department Inspector General reviewed that particular report, and the determination was that the use of force did not rise to the level of a policy violation.
Yeah,
Do you have
Board
your
Member
question?
Strickland, the questions I had were really just in the investigation where it talked about the officer, the terminology used had punched the individual. When you go back and based on the information that the IG's office provided, that the officer had used, I believe, in the use of force report, it was a hammer strike. And so gathering just some more information from that, also getting more information on the resistance level of the individual that the officer was engaged in. Just getting all of that additional information was very helpful. Also, the use of force seemed to be within policies and procedure, a level 4 use of force. So I appreciated that added information to the report.
Thank you for that. And for those use of force situations in the future, and I know some of them are included and others, but in the future, to have those included as well would be super helpful. And thank you for the follow-up questions for answering those responses. Our committee agreed with the finding of the Department of Inspector General for this particular case. And so we'd make a motion to accept the Department of Inspector General's recommendation of unfounded for, or exonerated for allegation 1 and for unfounded for allegation 2.
Any second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor of accepting the recommendations as given, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, turning to Subcommittee 3.
Case number 2023-1501. This is the one that we tabled last month. The complainant alleged that police officers were racist towards her black grandchildren by only handcuffing them and not handcuffing their white friend after they were caught smoking marijuana in a vehicle. After an interview of the complainant, review of body-worn camera, review of Columbus Division of Police policy, and interviews of the officers involved, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officers be closed as unfounded. Our subcommittee agreed with that, and I motion that this board agrees with the findings, the finding as well as unfounded in case number 2023-1501.
Okay. And we'll reserve voting until,
Okay.
any other questions? Does anyone have? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Case number 2023-1751. November 17, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging misconduct by Columbus police officers. The complainant alleged officers failed to offer him medical assistance after he was involved in an altercation that left the complainant with injuries. The DIG investigation consisted of an interview of the complainant, a review of the 911 audio, a review of Columbus Division of Police directives, and a review of computer-aided dispatch from the incident. The investigation found that the officers in question were not in violation of any policy or procedure. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officers be closed as exonerated, as there is evidence that the complainant was already asked if he needed medical assistance by the 911 operator, and he declined. Our committee agreed with the motion. Let's see. The IG finding was exonerated. Our subcommittee agreed with that finding, and I move that this board agrees with the findings of the IG in case number 2023-1751.
Second.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. So in case number 23-1501, it's been moved and seconded to accept the report as given and the recommendations therein. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-1751, moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, next, returning back to Board Member Nathan for February case assignments.
Case number 2023-0514, the incident arose from the arrest of the complainant for violating a protective order, which was issued in a domestic violence case. The protective order was canceled on February 28th, 2023, but wasn't updated in the legal enforcement automated data system, that's acronym LEADS. When the complainant's name came up for a gun event on October 24th, 2023, the arresting officer saw he had a protective order in the system, confirmed that with CPD. The complainant was arrested and incarcerated for 2 days until the error was discovered. The DIG found that the officer complied with police policies and procedures, and so found that the allegation of misconduct was, in this allegation of misconduct, the officer was exonerated. We agreed. And so I move in case 2023-0514 to accept the IG's finding of exoneration.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, any questions?
This is case 2023-0772. The incident arose from a police officer who helped the complainant's wife pick up her stuff from the complainant's home. There are 3 allegations made by husband first, that the officer yelled and screamed at him, told him to open the door immediately. The IG found that the officer had knocked on the doors and windows, shined his flashlight through the windows, rang the doorbell, made several attempts to contact the complainant by phone, and once contact was made, the officer asked the complainant from outside the bedroom window to identify himself and come to the door. The officer didn't yell, scream, or tell the complainant to open the door immediately, didn't violate any CPD policy. Regarding allegation 2, the complainant alleged that the police officer knew the brother of his wife. Based on the information found, the IG discovered that the officer did not know the brother of his wife, and so they recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. And third, that the wife and the officer began searching the house without a warrant. The IG found that the officer was acting within CPD policy when assisting the complainant's wife to retrieve her items from the home, but the officer was not seen conducting any search of the person, place, or things in the home. And so the IG recommended that allegation 3 be closed with a finding of unfounded. So I move in case number 2023-772 to accept the IG's finding of unfounded regarding all 3 allegations.
Any seconds?
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
This is case number 2023-1407. The officer stopped the complainant's car, alleging that she failed to signal when entering the highway. They then proceeded to pat her down, search the car. She was cited for failing to signal and for a window tint violation. The evidence obtained from the body-worn camera indicates that the complainant did in fact signal. The stop appears to be entirely pretextual. It looks like they were looking for drugs. There are 3 allegations of officer misconduct in this case. First, that the officers cited her for not wearing a seatbelt. They did not, however, actually issue a ticket. And so in this case, the allegation that she was cited for a seatbelt violation was closed with a finding of unfounded, and we agree. But on the other 2 allegations that sprang from this illegal stop, the first allegation, the second allegation was that she was patted down, and that was a violation of law and CPD policy. She never should have been stopped or removed from her car because she in fact did signal. And the third allegation, so they IG sustained that allegation of misconduct regarding the pat down, and the third allegation was that the claim that she was stopped due to failing to signal. The investigation revealed that that reasoning was fallacious, that the complainant in fact did use her signal, and so it's recommended this allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. And so regarding the allegations in case number 2023-1407, we move to accept the IG's finding of unfounded regarding the seatbelt violation, but sustained regarding the pat-down and the failure to signal And the reasoning was pretextual. And so we accept the I move to accept the IG's findings in case 2023-1407.
May I have a second? Second. Okay, any questions?
This is case 2023-1490. This is a domestic violence incident, and there are conflicting stories between the complainant and the alleged assailant, who is the boyfriend. Each party was interviewed separately by individual officers, but they were interviewed within earshot of each other. And there seems to be multiple failures by each officer in conducting the domestic violence investigation. So regarding both officers, there's two allegations. One, that they didn't conduct a sufficient investigation, and the IG sustained the complaint, the allegation with respect to both officers. And second, that the officers failed to interview each party outside the hearing of each other. And that was also found to be sustained. They were interviewed within earshot, which further escalated the scene because they were able to hear what the other person was saying instead of taking them one inside the house or at a distance to interview. So in case number 2023-1490, I move to accept the IG's findings of sustained regarding the allegations concerning both officers.
May I have a second? Second. Okay, any questions?
And finally, case number 2023-1763, the complainant alleged that the police officers illegally used their emergency lights to make a difficult turn. The complainant only supplied their email address for contact info and failed to respond to 2 attempts by the DIG for additional information. The officers were responding to a call for a theft in progress when he used his emergency lights to get through a busy intersection. So based on the available evidence, the officer's use of their lights was within CPD policy. The allegations against the officer was closed with a finding of exonerated. I move in case number 2023-1763 to accept the IG's finding of exoneration regarding the officer's use of their emergency lights.
Second.
All right, any questions?
So can I ask you the case before that, the DV case?
Yeah.
Were there any arrests?
No.
Okay. And then who was the complainant?
The complainant was the woman. She said that in this case, they didn't investigate the scene where she said she had her head slammed. They didn't really go in the house. They accepted the assailant boyfriend's version, or appeared to accept his version, and also accepted his demeanor was calmer. She was angered by his responses that she could hear while she was being interviewed and he was being interviewed. So they didn't separate them. It just appears to be improper policing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, we have motions and seconds on, I'll just go one at a time, 23-0514. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-0772, there's an open motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-1407, moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Case number 23-1490, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And last, case number 23-1763. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All those motions carry. All right, turning back to Team 2 for your February case readouts.
Any chance we can move to Board Member McIntosh? Sure. Thank you. I've got to leave early.
We'll take it.
Thank you.
Case number 2023-1395. On September 14th, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the Department of the Inspector General alleging police misconduct by a CPD officer. The complainant alleged that her 13-year-old grandson was struck by a police cruiser during a traffic incident where officers were attempting to stop an occupied stolen vehicle. The incident occurred on the parking lot of a grocery store. The DIG reviewed BWC, CVS data, CAD information, and they had telephone interviews with the complainant and her daughter, and also an in-person interview with the CPD officer involved. Information was also obtained from 2 store employees who preferred to remain anonymous when asked about the circumstances regarding the incident. In regard to the complainant's allegation that her grandson was struck by this officer's cruiser, the investigation found that the misconduct alleged by the complainant did not occur. The juvenile was not struck by the officer's cruiser, and it is recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. The conclusion, the complainant alleged that Officer S backed his police cruiser in reverse and struck her 13-year-old grandson. Based on the information and the evidence, there was nothing to substantiate this allegation. The BWC and the CVS data directly refuted this allegation. The information obtained from 2 Family Dollar employees who preferred anonymity was consistent with the BWC and the CVS review. Both employees stated that that the officer's cruiser did not hit the juvenile during the incident, that he fell on the ground due to running into an orange traffic barrel. In addition, Officer S refuted the complainant's allegation in his statement regarding the incident. No CPD policies were found to be in violation. It is recommended that the allegation against Officer S be closed with a finding of unfounded, as there was no evidence to substantiate this. Our committee reviewed this, and we concur with the finding of the IG. We move at this time to accept the findings as to case number 2023-1395.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Yes. If an officer is in his car and is in reverse, is his BWC on?
Good question.
Because it says view of the BWC. And I'm saying if the officer is in his car and he's got his vehicle in reverse, is his BWC on?
Part of the allegation is that when the incident happened, they were saying that the officer did not get out. So there was BWC that was reviewed, there was also CD.
Okay, I understand the cruiser video, but is his BWC activated if he's in the car? That's what I'm asking. Is the officer's BWC activated if he's in the car?
It would have just been activated once he got out.
Okay, because.
So that's why we were saying, what they're saying is, the conclusion is just telling you everything that we.
Okay, so there was no BWC footage.
Well,
No,
here's what it says. A review was done of the BWC data from Officer.
I heard that, but what I'm saying, if the officer is in the car, there is no BWC footage because it's not activated.
Okay, this might give you a little explanation here. It's not, maybe not totally. Go ahead. Do you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay. A review was done of the BWC data that Officer S had during his response to a 1045 stolen vehicle recovered call with other patrol officers on the parking lot of Family Dollar. The BWC review indicated Officer S. did stop to check on the well-being of Miss B's son after he had tripped over a large orange traffic barrel and fell on the store parking lot. The traffic barrel was located near the rear passenger side of the police cruiser. Miss Bailey's son tripped over the base of the traffic barrel when he ran in a north to south direction on the lot and behind Officer S's police cruiser. While checking on the juvenile's well-being, Officer S. can be heard in audio data asking if Miss Bailey's son
You
was.
don't have to read all this. Since I
Okay.
understand what's going on. It was another officer's
Correct.
BWC. That's what I was trying to get to, because when it was first read, it was like, the BWC of the officer in the car
Oh, I got
was
you.
working. Okay, so I understand now. It was the BWC from another officer that was there on the scene that was running.
Okay.
All right.
Was there a second?
Yes.
Yes, I just had a question, that's all.
And number two, on October 23rd, 2023, the City of Columbus Department of the Inspector General received a complaint alleging excessive use of force and police misconduct. The complainant alleged that October 21, 2023, she was sitting in her vehicle in a parking lot at a local bar when a situation occurred that required police response. The complainant said she exited her vehicle to retrieve her sister, who was inside the bar. The complainant alleged when she attempted to enter the bar, an officer pushed her and threw her against the wall. And number two, the officer used profanity while threatening her with a taser. The investigation here consisted of an interview of the complainant, an interview of the complainant's sister, officer statements from both managers from this establishment, CAD report, and a review of the policies and procedure. The investigation found the focus officer was working special duty at the bar on the date of the incident, but no evidence was found that substantiated the complainant's allegation that this officer pushed her or threw her against the wall. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation number one be closed with a finding of unfounded. Additionally, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation that the officer used profanity while threatening to tase her. Therefore, it is recommended that number two be closed as unfounded. The conclusion here is, okay, so the allegation that it's the same officer, two allegations. The allegation that Officer J pushed her against the wall. There was no evidence to substantiate this, so that there is a recommendation that it be closed as unfounded. And as to number two, that he used profanity while tasing her, that allegation, there's nothing to substantiate that, so there's a recommendation that that be closed as unfounded. Our committee did review this. This was a special duty situation, so there was no BWC, and the directive indicates that Directive 11.07 BWC and CVS indicates that it is not required during special duty, but they may be used. So our committee discussed this, and we, again, think that however, so it's up to the individual officer. So our committee reviewed, and we agree with the DIG as to the findings here, as to the findings of unfounded. We move to accept the findings of the DIG as to case number 2023-1604, but with a review of the policy as to Police Directive 11.072, capital G, BWC, CVS, in that BWC must be required for special duty and not only optional if available. And And it is recommended that the investigative report and board recommendation be forwarded to the chief of police, Columbus Division of Police for review, and to the safety director, and to the Fraternal Order of Police, Capital City Lodge Number 9.
Okay, if I could briefly, so separately, I've got your motion on 23-1604. Could we have a second just on the initial complaint itself? And then I'm going to talk about the review of 1107 in a moment.
Second.
Okay. Any questions on that?
I was wondering what additional evidence here in terms of this particular case? So we got unfounded, want to get a sense of what else was reviewed specifically. I'm trying to pull up this specific case number
Okay,
here.
the two managers, this happened at a bar and grill, and there were two managers who were interviewed. And so this was a chaotic situation when the bar started to close at the end of the night. So on the alleged night of the incident, this is just to give you a little, on the alleged night of the incident, a person was outside shooting in the air of his car, from his car, and the officers were attempting to catch this individual, who subsequently ended up crashing his car. So one of the managers explained to the special duty officers in the parking lot were called to assist this other officer. Mr. J said that there were disruptive individuals inside the bar that evening who were being dealt by security, but neither manager remembered seeing. So these were two individual managers who were interviewed, and as to the officers' actions. And neither manager remember seeing Officer J pushing or fighting a female in the parking lot. In addition, manager explained once he was contacted by Columbus DIG to be interviewed, he reviewed the video footage himself. So there was no BWC, but there was video footage from the bar, and the manager indicated that he reviewed that footage from the hours of 11 o'clock through closing. He did not find any information pertaining to this allegation reported to him by the GIG submitted by the individual, but by the complaining female. So this was pretty substantial, our committee thought, as far as the finding of the DIG.
I think one of the concerns is bring this particular case back up. One part, it mentions that the officers made, or the allegations were that the officers made a statement, I will tase you and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then it indicates here that the statements given by two individuals were given while both were present and listening to each other, thus affecting the reliability and credibility of statements given to the Columbus Department of Inspector General. It's a little concerning in terms of how that was done. I mean, so I'm just trying to get a sense. Do we know anything from the bar manager? The bar manager couldn't recall anything as well?
Well, there were two bar managers.
And they didn't recall?
They did recall.
They didn't recall the officer saying anything regarding?
Exactly. But they did review the BWC, excuse me, not the BWC, their video footage.
Yeah.
Officer, and they did not see any pushing or by this officer, any pushing of the female between the hours of 11 o'clock through closing.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, that part. Is that clear at that?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
And then, let's see, let me see if I can get to the,
I've got it now. I've pulled it up. Thank you.
okay. He said that, and what was going on, there were individuals who had come out of the bar. These managers were trying to get people out of the bar, and then there were people trying to get back in the bar, and he was trying to keep them out. And plus, you have to remember, there were people shooting guns outside of the bar. So it was a little bit of a...
Yeah, thank you.
let's see if,
Yeah, I've got it.
okay. Are there any other questions? Let's see.
So the one thing I want to turn to on the recommendation about the special duty and BWC cameras, we have already made a recommendation to the chief as to that specific policy and asked for it to be reviewed at a prior meeting. And we do have in our list of questions to the chief, questions about both policy recommendations that we've already made, but also specifically digging into the BWC issue.
Okay.
So with that being said, does your committee still want to make a separate recommendation?
Mac? No.
Okay.
So we're good. Okay.
Okay, and we do have a second, so you can continue, Mary.
All right. My next case is 2023-1678. On November 6, 2023, the Inspector General received a complaint of police misconduct. The complainant works at Columbus Focus High School North. The complainant alleges that the school contacted 911 on November the 2nd, 2023, at least 2 times for assistance, and no officer responded to the school to assist with their emergency. So the DIG, reviewed body-worn camera footage, CAD, event chronology report, unit history, and audio calls, and they interviewed the officer involved. The investigation revealed from the school that the call was placed at 11:33 a.m. to 911. However, the officer was not dispatched until 1:02 to respond to this incident. The officer did not physically respond to the school because the officer contacted the staff member and was advised the student was no longer present and police response was no longer needed. The officer's action was within CPD policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation against the officer for not responding at the high school be closed as exonerated. The conclusion here was, the
I think
allegation,
it's the same, right?
I'm sorry.
Is the conclusion the same as the summary? Because if it's so, I'm cool with the summary.
Is everybody cool with the summary, or would you like for me to read it? I'd like to clarify, Kyle, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
The complainant alleged here that the school contacted 911 at least 2 times for assistance and no officer responded. The investigation revealed that 911 received 2 calls requesting police assistance for this incident on November the 2nd between 11:33 and 12:19 p.m. However, no officer was dispatched until 1:02 p.m. Officer M contacted the ECC to update that he placed the call to the source and police assistance was no longer required. Officer M cleared the run with the disposition of assistance provided, no report needed. The officer's actions were within CPD policy procedure, and it is recommended that this be closed as exonerated. So our review committee reviewed this, and we agree with the IG that the officer did follow policy and procedure. We had a question for the IG because the call, there were 2 calls made, and the officer wasn't dispatched to 1:02 p.m. So the calls were made, let's see, the 911 calls were made at 11:33 a.m. and the call to the school, and the officer wasn't dispatched till 1:02. And the IG responded that it should be noted that we receive complaints specifically regarding, that when we receive calls regarding 911 matters, those calls are forwarded to the ECC, and the caller is advised to contact ECC directly also. So our committee was concerned about the fact that the officer didn't get notice till 1 o'clock after the calls were made at 11:30. We move to accept the findings of the IG as to 2023-1676 and refer the complaint and investigative report to the Chief, Department of Public Safety for review for, and here we might need some help, for possible discipline and as to the 911 operator, and we also think it should be forwarded to the ECC, Emergency Communications Center, for review and appropriate action.
Is that within our jurisdiction?
So
I don't know.
dispatchers, are they civilians or are they?
They, I believe, but they are up under public safety, so we can refer this. I know I know we've looked at their policies, so we know that there are specific policies and instances in how they dispatch, but we can definitely forward this report to public safety if we want, public safety to review exactly what occurred in this incident.
Gotcha, okay. Quick clarification as well. Ms. Brock, can I get clarity on the case number? I think Board Member Younger said 1676, but I thought it was.
Oh, it's 1678.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so your subcommittee is recommending to accept the report as given, but in addition to.
In addition, let's see, refer this complaint and the investigative report to the chief and to the Department of Public Safety for review and possible discipline for the 911 operator, and it should also be forwarded to the ECC. Yeah,
I don't think we should do that.
for review and appropriate action.
Forwarding this to potentially discipline the 911 dispatcher, I wouldn't do that.
Well,
So
go ahead. I mean, who should it be? Oh, go ahead.
I'll let counsel. I was just saying, they're not sworn personnel, so you don't
Okay,
have
so we
authority
can't do
over
that.
them to do anything. But if the complaint is better served at some other agency, you can certainly make a referral for somebody who has jurisdiction over them to look into the matter.
Okay, so help us out. How should it?
just forward it.
Because, there's an issue here because the school called at 11:33 and they needed help. The officer gets dispatched at 1:02. So there's a problem here, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, there has to be a procedure for a complaint to be filed against a dispatcher. I don't know what that is, but I'm certainly willing to look into it and let you know where to refer it.
Okay.
can we just,
Over to the appropriate
Okay.
investigatory entity.
That's great.
Okay,
Even
so it's already been done?
Good to go.
Even
Okay,
better.
so then we're good.
Perfect. I do still need a second on the original motion, though, please. Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right.
got it. 2023-1773. On November 21st, 2023, the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging police misconduct involving officers from CPD. The complainant alleged police officers dragged a gunshot wounded individual on the ground. Basically, what happened was the complainant's neighbor was shot. He comes to her apartment, which is in close proximity, knocks on her door, bangs on her door. She's, of course, frightened. She notices that it's him. He wants help. She calls 911. Officers arrive on the scene, and that gunshot wounded individual is laying in front of her door. She cracks the door open to speak with the officers and is asking them where the ambulance is. The officers can hear the sirens in the background and tells her that they're coming. The officer is also trying to get information from the victim. The officer asked the victim who shot him, and he pointed to the door next to this neighbor. the officers felt like they were in the line of fire if that person still was in that apartment. So they dragged him to safety. I think the complainant misunderstood what they were doing, but they were actually dragging him to safety, and they rendered aid to that victim. So, the IG's finding was that there was no misconduct observed, because they certainly looked at BWC, there was no misconduct observed with how the Columbus police handled the victim. So the IG's recommendation was exoneration. And our subcommittee agreed with that, and we motioned that this board agrees with the findings of exonerated in case number 2023-1773.
Second.
Great, any questions? Okay.
All right, case number 2023-1794. On November 27th, 2023, the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint involving misconduct. The complainant alleged that he was pulled over by a police officer for something that is not legal. After an interview with the complainant, a review of the body-worn camera, a review of the City of Columbus ordinances, and a review of Columbus Division of Police policies, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it's recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. Basically, in this case, the officer pulled him over for failing to signal within 100 feet, not within 100 feet, but 100 feet or more before he made the turn. When the officer approached the vehicle and explained to the driver what he was being pulled over for, he misspoke a little bit. He did, however, write the ticket correctly. And maybe by the officer misspeaking, the driver thought what he did was legal, when in fact it wasn't. So, let's see. The recommendation for this allegation was unfounded. We agree with that, and I motion that this board agrees with this, with that finding of unfounded in case number 2023-1794.
May I have a second? Okay, any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes,
on
sir.
this one. I have a question on this one. So this officer pulled him over because he put a turn signal on 100 feet away from a stop sign?
He was not 100, not from the stop sign, from its turn.
From his turn.
So he was less than 100 feet in making that turn. You have to be 100 feet or more prior to making your turn.
Well, how come I can't get none of them to pull some folks over for not making a turn signal? For not putting on the
Pastor
turn?
Nathan, you have no idea, or Pastor Tatum, you have no idea how much time that Mac and I spent on this case.
Yeah. It's not a
it's a-
violation that's
It's horrible because
done a lot.
he signaled 100 feet before. I mean, you have to be 100 feet
Or more.
or more.
And maybe
Now,
he was
what
less
human
than.
being has to, it's a total pretextual stop. I mean, who can measure that?
I just want to
And-
get some of them that's gonna get somebody a ticket when they don't put a turn signal on.
But, you know,
That's all I
we have to follow, I mean, he didn't, we had to do what we had to do.
All right, that's all I want to say.
Okay. All right, so that is all the cases from Subcommittee 3. I'm going to read those out. Case number 23-1395. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
We're good.
Okay. Case number 23-1604, all in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-1678, all in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Case number 23-1773, all in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Last, case number 23-1794, all in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right. So Team 2, you all be reciting next?
We'll hold ours for next time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I will then turn us back to, we had a number of issues that we were going to discuss at last meeting that we did not get to, so we can start working our way through those. All right. Okay, so one of the things, and here's what I'll do if you all are okay with it. Some of the questions that we had, that we were going to discuss, we actually put in our requests to the chief. I will tell you what those are. Let me know if you'd like to discuss them now or wait to hear the chief or the chief's representative respond. So one of the questions we were going to talk about is essentially what happens to private property after it's mistakenly retained by law enforcement. So it's not being used for a case, it's not necessary for evidence. So that was one of the things. Should we recommend the policy? We have put that question in for Chief Bryant. Does anyone want to discuss that specific issue right
Can I
now?
just ask a quick question? Just for context, was that the driver's license? Is that what brought that about?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Does anyone want to discuss it now or save it for when we hear from the chief in June? Okay. Another one that is also in front, or at least we included, let's see where it is. The body-worn camera policy and the status request of that. That was another issue that we wanted to discuss, but that's also on the list for Chief Bryant. Actually, having Chief Bryant come to the meetings was one of the issues we were going to discuss. That has been scheduled. Sorry, I'm just working my way down it.
But there's still the possibility that she may not actually come.
We've gotten confirmation from the office that either the chief or her representative will be here June 4th.
Okay, all right.
That we have it in writing, Reverend Tatum, so all the more reason why you might want to stick around for a couple more months, but that's just, that's just me. Okay, so here's an issue that we do ask a question about Chief Bryant, but I don't think, I don't know that the question itself, these two questions, solve our inquiry. First is, what's the process between internal affairs and us, and the interplay there? And then are we keeping track somewhere as a board IG where IAB finds discipline on a case that we also have a complaint on?
Again, there's a process, everything goes through the chain of command. Once they are done, those reports come back to us, and we are keeping that in a separate smart sheet, so we're able to kind of report out on that.
And then, to your knowledge, when a case comes in to Internal Affairs, and Internal Affairs decides to forward those to us, have they created a formal process, or is it just when they've decided or they think that it fits within the board and IG's purview, if anyone knows?
So I may not understand your question, so I'll answer it in how I'm perceiving it. So if there is a case that our board submits that goes through the chain of command, part of the process is when that's done, especially if it's something that applies to us, that does come to us. Now, what their process of how they do that, I don't know what their process is, but I know that we do get the information. I do know that the beginning of, this is what, March, I believe in February, we sent a letter to the chief with a list of cases that we had submitted that we didn't get any findings on, that we haven't gotten feedback on. So we do know that she did forward that through because we did get some commands that responded to us and started sending us some things that were missing.
And on the front end, I think we've had 2 cases where IAB was they were investigating something and then decided to send it to us. Do we know what their front-end process looks like when they do that?
I don't know their process. What I
Okay.
can tell you is dealing with IAB, anytime IAB gets a case that involves a citizen complaint, that does come to us.
Okay, okay.
And that's because we do know that there's been some commands that have investigated something that that came to IAB, and IAB identified that as being a citizen complaint and informed the command that it should have came to us, and then it is forwarded directly to us.
Okay, perfect. I think that was one of the questions somebody had. All right, next up, should there be a different use of force policy when it comes to calls concerning mental health crises? That was a question from last month's meeting. Anyone want to jump in or have thoughts?
Is there an example?
So one of the cases that we had involved a person who was experiencing a mental health crisis. A family member of theirs called, and there was a level of force that had to be used to kind of calm the situation. And so the question came up of basically how many CIT officers are out there? Has everybody been updated in training? Should there be a separate use of force when you're dealing with a mental health crisis?
I don't remember the conversation on that, but I am curious how that would even work.
Yeah, I don't
I-
How is it dispatched? You know, that's my thing. If someone in the family says, you know, that individual is acting in an erratic or unstable way, how is that dispatched when they dispatch that out? Is that dispatched out as possible mental problem? How is that even dispatched? You know, that's one of the questions that I have. How is that even dispatched? Is it dispatched as like a regular run, or, you know?
I think there's a 10 code specific to
Okay.
mental health crises. But again, I think
But when that's
Sometimes,
dispatched, do they
depending on
send do they have a mental health unit that is dispatched to go with that officer?
I think if they're available.
correct.
If they're available,
There are
so
only
there's
a
not
certain
that
amount of
many.
officers,
Yeah.
and they only work a certain amount of hours. So
Okay.
depending on when the call comes in, like if it's third shift, likely you're not going to have that alternative response unit to respond. But there is a specific 10 code for the dispatch. It really depends on what information is given to the dispatcher. So sometimes the run will start as 110 code and then change multiple times.
But it's up to the
As the
discretion
officer
of the
learns more
dispatcher,
information.
Also the caller.
Correct, like the
Calling
information
in,
the caller
yeah.
provides and then the dispatcher as well. But
I just think practically that would be difficult because I could see, I mean, if we look at different use of force for mental health, I mean, I understand the intention, but then are we also going to consider a different set of use of force standards for potential substance abuse? Or, I mean, I practically am not sure how that would be implemented. Again, I see the intention, I just don't know how it would work.
Yeah. I don't.
No, and maybe that may be a question to ask the chief when she comes, or her representative. Is there anything, you know, in the works for those kinds of situations? Because I don't even know how that would work.
Now, one of the questions we are asking is about the intersection of racial bias in use of force.
Yes.
And I'd say alternatively, you know, maybe we can tack the mental health piece on there or just broaden it. I think we could also ask one of the commanders from the academy to come and give us the overview that they have, because I recall from the Safety Commission, we got a lesson on their CIT and kind of how those calls operated, what they tried to do, if they didn't have enough officers available who had been CIT trained. But it might be well worth an invitation to have them come back and talk to us again.
Yeah.
Yep. Board Member Younger?
I'm not exactly sure which one it was, but there was a situation that happened in February, and it could have happened in January, where it's a mental health issue where an individual was shot and killed by police officers. And the call came from a house. It was a house that housed mostly mental health individuals. And I heard on the radio a representative from the police department speaking, and he said that they did not know that this particular home housed those individuals. And then someone else spoke from the police department and said, we are now, it could have been the chief, I'm not sure, but we are now putting that home on the list so that we know that when the call comes from there, that they are housing, because no one from the mental health sector went there. And that person ended up being killed because he wanted to die, and that's what he was, I think it happened, his name may have been Jennings. And he wanted to die, and one officer was yelling, had a taser out, and then the other one had his firearm, but no mental health people went. But is there a system where Columbus Police can know where they're being called to? I mean, can they somehow get, have someone check to see the homes that house the mentally ill so that they know who, they're going to a home that's housing mentally ill individuals? That would be a question for the chief that I would have, rather than having this happen after someone is killed.
So I think it would be, as much as her being here might get a question on the general policy, what it is, I feel like it might be really helpful to have one of the academy people come talk about how they train to it. Because I vaguely remember one of our scenarios when we went to the academy and had to practice, there was a simulation, like is it called what's it called? Milo? Milo, yes. And so some of those scenarios were specific to mental health calls.
Yeah.
And so so I recall like having the unloaded weapon, but being told you're responding to a mental health crisis, like person is experiencing suicidal ideation, has a knife, and so I know they do it. But I'd be interested in knowing the difference between what a non-CIT officer gets versus a CIT officer, because I think CIT is like a 40 or 80-hour training, if I recall. So there's a significant amount of work that those officers do to learn how to de-escalate in those situations. And I can't remember how much non-CIT get, but it would be interesting to kind of hear from the trainers. And then maybe if we hear from them and we decide we'd like to make a recommendation about CIT, then we could have like a much more informed one. Because I think that also hits on the case from today about the mobile crisis response unit. It's very similar topic-wise, and maybe if we had a little more information, we'd be able to make a more learned recommendation. Yeah.
And I think the goal is already to expand those units, right?
Yes.
Well, you know, I think that's a hot button item right now, because we are finding that we have more people that are facing mental health issues. And I remember a few years ago, we fought hard to bring a model to Columbus from Cleveland that was a house, like a clubhouse for those who were facing mental health issues and felt like they had no place to go. I think Adam H. kind of picked up on it and ran with it. So I think that that's something that's very worthy of us looking into, because we have a lot of folks, more folks than we realize, that are dealing with mental health issues.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so I've got that on the agenda. Stephanie, I will send you an email so we can put together like a formal request over to the academy. It was Commander Meter who I think trained us in the Safety Commission in the very beginning of the board, so we'll see. Oh, what'd you say?
He's gone.
He's gone. Oh, he was also, I won't say a lawyer because I don't think he was licensed, but he also had gone to law school.
Yeah.
So he really liked, yeah.
Yes, I remember him.
Okay, so we've got, I'm going to smush a couple of them into one because they're related and then separate out the last one from today. So the questions come up a few times. How are we kind of tracking cases where the same officer shows up multiple times? Or how are we tracking types of allegations that end up being sustained? And then could we create some sort of public dashboard? So I think this all comes down to like, how are we collating data? How do we publish it? What information do we keep in it? And I think we've already had somewhat of a discussion about that for the report. Setting aside the issue of a public dashboard, because I know those are expensive, how would we as a board like to see kind of information separated or split out? I think looking at the report as a, starting point for our own understanding is great. Is there anything else you'd like to ask the IG to include moving forward? So that way, if the public says, well, how many of these cases were racially biased, or how many of these use of force cases were sustained and resulted in discipline, we'll take a minute and let her know everything we'd like to hope for.
Yeah, and I think we talked about last board meeting, some of this may be addressed in the future because there's the data analyst that's coming on board, correct? And that was one of my questions in discussion, was the status of that. And I think the issue of looking at data, looking at trends, and then today when it was brought up, looking at recognizing their different systems, but what are other municipalities and jurisdictions doing? Is the data that we're currently getting or hope to get, could we look at it comparatively with those, some of those, jurisdictions? I think all of that might be, once we have that person, I think that's worthy of even, talking to them directly about some of that, and that may resolve a lot of this, because that they could do a much deeper dive into this. They could look at trends, they could look at officers, all of those things we've been wanting. It seems like that person's going to, gift us potentially.
Absolutely. It's a lot of things that we want to do, especially now that we have our own data and we're collecting that. Of course, we're more focused on looking at what some of the trends are here with CPD, and if we want to recommend some policies or procedures, then kind of looking out to see, based on other city entities that would have the same city size, same police size, kind of looking to see, if they're having similar issues with certain things, what are some of the best practices there. So definitely where that is right now, we have applications submitted. And so hopefully within the next 2 weeks, I think we would like to be doing some video. Usually we do virtual interviews before we do in-person interviews. So it's a process. Yes, yes. Excuse me.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts for the IG on what info you hope we'd be able to have ready at our fingertips?
I just don't want to give too much information, but there is another city entity that did reach out to us that has some funding and are looking at, matter of fact, I might let Richard talk a little bit more about it, because I know he talked to them, so we might have an entity, we might be able to post some stuff, so we're just saying.
Sure. So yes, another city entity, again, I don't want to, put their name out there, but they, we went to talk to council, they were asking for some data as well, and the other city department said that they are in the process of creating this, I think it's with, I don't know if it's with Microsoft, but someone under larger, software firms, and creating this platform on the city's website that houses all of this data, and they are invited us to house our information on there as well as some other departments around the city. So it's like a big, it's a big deal, and so we don't have a lot of details, so we're not trying to be secretive. We just don't have the information, but, well, it is on our mind, and we are trying to, work with other departments to get that information out there.
That's perfect. Very, very exciting. Okay, well, the only last one I will actually hold until our next meeting because it was the issue that Board Member Strickland brought up about the statements to citizens, legality, rudeness, and what sort of conduct could fall under there. So I don't want to have that discussion without him since that was very important to him. All right, anyone have anything else? Please take a look at the March case assignments. Take note of the April meeting. And unless anyone has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Oh, and we've got seconds. All in favor, please raise your hands. So adjourned.
We did, except for
The end.